Stay quiet and follow me, the janitor said, and the CEO almost laughed before everything changed. The ballroom of the Vance Global Summit shimmered under crystal chandeliers, each one casting warm gold across polished marble floors, where executives in tailored suits moved like chess pieces in a game they believed they controlled, their voices low, confident, and edged with quiet arrogance. Charlotte Vance stood at the center of it all, poised, composed, her heels clicking with measured precision as she surveyed her empire in motion. A woman who had built billion-dollar decisions on instinct and never once looked back, not for doubt, not for regret, and certainly not for a man like him. "You missed a spot," she said without turning, her tone sharp, dismissive, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command obedience. "Or is attention to detail not part of your job description?" The man behind her paused, his hand still on the mop handle, his posture relaxed, almost too calm for someone being addressed that way. And when he finally looked up, his eyes didn't challenge her, didn't plead either. They simply observed, steady, unreadable. "I'll take care of it," Marcus Hale replied quietly. A few nearby executives exchanged glances, faint smirks tugging at their lips, the kind of silent agreement that placed him exactly where they believed he belonged, invisible until he wasn't doing something right. Charlotte exhaled through her nose, already moving on, already dismissing him as part of the background noise that came with maintaining perfection. Because in her world, people like Marcus didn't interrupt outcomes, they cleaned up after them. The music shifted subtly, a string quartet easing into a softer arrangement, the clink of champagne glasses echoing gently. And for a moment, everything felt controlled, predictable, exactly as Charlotte demanded it to be. Then her assistant hurried toward her, heels uneven, breath slightly off rhythm, tablet clutched too tightly in her hands. "Charlotte, we have a situation," she whispered, but the tension in her voice carried further than she intended. Charlotte's jaw tightened just enough to notice. "Define." "Situation. The system, our live financial projections, they're not aligning, and the investors upstairs are starting to ask questions." Charlotte's gaze sharpened, the air around her cooling by degrees. "Fix it. We're trying, but the data feed is unstable." A flicker, brief but real, passed through Charlotte's expression. Not fear, not yet, but the kind of calculation that happens when control begins to slip. And across the room, Marcus watched it all unfold without moving, his grip on the mop loosening slightly, as if the moment itself had shifted into something familiar. "Give me 5 minutes," Charlotte said, already turning toward the private corridor that led to the control rooms, her pace quickening, her mind racing through contingencies, through names, through numbers, through everything she could still command. She didn't notice Marcus step forward until he was beside her, close enough that his voice didn't need to rise. "Stay quiet," he said, calm, certain, like a man who had already seen the ending. Charlotte stopped mid-step, her eyes snapping toward him, disbelief flashing sharp and immediate. "Excuse me?" The hallway lights hummed softly overhead, the distant music fading behind them, and for a second, the world narrowed to the space between them. Marcus didn't flinch. "Follow me," he added just as quietly. And somehow, against logic, against instinct, against everything she believed about control, Charlotte Vance hesitated. Charlotte Vance did not follow orders. She gave them. And yet something in the man's voice had not sounded like a request. It had sounded like a conclusion already decided, and that unsettled her more than the numbers flashing in her mind. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why I should not have security escort you out," she said, her tone low and controlled as they stood at the threshold of the private corridor, her assistant hovering behind her with visible uncertainty. Marcus did not look at the assistant, did not look at the cameras tucked discreetly into the ceiling corners. He looked only at Charlotte, steady, composed, like a man who had already measured the room and found it predictable. "Because whatever is happening upstairs is not a glitch," he said. "It is a pattern." Charlotte narrowed her eyes slightly, irritation flickering into focus. "You are a janitor. You do not have access to that information." "No," Marcus replied calmly. but I have seen what happens when systems fail quietly before they fail loudly. 3 executives passed behind them, their conversation abruptly fading as they noticed the tension, the contrast between power and stillness hanging in the air like a held breath. Charlotte folded her arms, a subtle shift in posture that signaled she was no longer dismissing him outright, but she was not yielding either. "You are suggesting my entire analytics infrastructure is compromised?" she asked. "I am saying," Marcus answered, his voice even, "that the numbers are not wrong by accident." The hallway lights hummed softly above them, the distant music from the ballroom now reduced to a faint echo. And for a brief moment, Charlotte felt something unfamiliar press against her instincts. Not fear, not yet, but the recognition of a possibility she had not accounted for. "If this is some kind of guess," she began. "It is not," Marcus interrupted gently, not raising his voice, not challenging her authority, but stepping into the space between assumption and certainty with quiet precision. "3 minutes ago, your assistant said the data feed was unstable. Not down, not disconnected, unstable. That means it is still receiving input." Charlotte's gaze shifted slightly, just enough to acknowledge the logic. "Go on," she said, the words measured, reluctant. Marcus nodded once. "If it were a system failure, everything would stop. Clean, silent. But instability means something is adjusting the numbers in real time." The assistant's grip tightened on the tablet. "That is not possible," she whispered. Marcus glanced at her briefly, not dismissing, just stating. "It is not supposed to be." Charlotte exhaled slowly, her mind already moving, recalculating, layering his words against the data she knew, the architecture she had approved, the safeguard she had paid millions to implement. "And you think you can fix it?" she said, her tone returning to its sharp edge, testing him now rather than dismissing him. Marcus did not smile. "I think I can show you where it is coming from." Silence settled between them, thick and deliberate, as Charlotte weighed risk against instinct, pride against outcome, control against the possibility of losing it entirely in front of the investors waiting upstairs. She turned slightly toward her assistant. "Hold all presentations. Delay the next segment by 10 minutes. "Charlotte, the board is already 10 minutes, she repeated, and this time there was no room for hesitation. The assistant nodded quickly and stepped back, already issuing quiet instructions into her headset. Charlotte turned back to Marcus, her eyes sharper now, more focused, less dismissive than before. "You have 5 minutes, she said. Marcus inclined his head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. "That is all I need." And without another word, he turned and began walking down the corridor, not checking if she would follow, not asking again, because he already knew she would. And after a fraction of a second that felt longer than it should have, Charlotte Vance followed. The corridor stretched ahead in quiet contrast to the polished chaos of the ballroom, the hum of fluorescent lights replacing the soft music behind them. And each step Charlotte Vance took echoed with a clarity she was not used to hearing in her own decisions. Marcus Hale walked half a pace ahead, not rushing, not slowing, moving with the kind of measured certainty that did not ask permission from the space it occupied. "Where exactly are you taking me?" Charlotte said, her voice controlled but edged now with something sharper than authority, something closer to urgency. Marcus did not turn. "To the part of your company that does not appear in presentations," he replied. They passed a set of double doors marked Authorized Personnel Only, and Marcus pushed through without hesitation, revealing a narrower hallway lined with exposed conduits and muted gray panels, the kind of place designed for function, not impression. Charlotte paused for half a second before following, her heels softer now against the industrial flooring, her surroundings. Shifting from curated elegance to operational truth. "You should not have access to this area," she said. "I clean every floor in this building," Marcus answered simply, "including the ones people forget matter most." The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of metal and recycled air, and somewhere deeper inside, the low, consistent sound of server fans began to rise, steady and mechanical, like a heartbeat that never asked to be noticed. Marcus stopped at a secured door, a keypad glowing faint blue beside it, and without looking back, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple access card, swiping it with practiced ease. Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly. "Janitors do not carry level 3 clearance," she said. Marcus opened the door and stepped aside just enough for her to enter first. "Tonight I do," he replied. Inside, the server room stretched wide and organized, rows of racks blinking with synchronized lights, cables running in precise lines like veins beneath a surface most people never saw. And for a moment, Charlotte stood still, taking in the physical embodiment of the system she had trusted for years. Marcus moved toward a terminal station at the far end, his steps quiet against the raised flooring. And when he reached it, he did not hesitate, his fingers moving across the keyboard with a familiarity that did not belong to someone outside the system. "What are you doing?" Charlotte asked, stepping closer now, her voice lower, more focused. "Listening," Marcus said. 3 quick keystrokes, 2 seconds of stillness. Then a screen filled with cascading data streams, numbers shifting in patterns too subtle for an untrained eye, but not random enough to be ignored. Charlotte leaned in slightly, her gaze sharpening as she followed the movement. "That is a live feed," she said. "It should not be accessible from this terminal." Marcus nodded once. "It is not supposed to be." He adjusted a parameter, isolating a segment of the data, and the fluctuations became more visible, small corrections happening every few seconds, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. "There," he said quietly. Charlotte's breath slowed, her mind aligning the pieces faster now. "That is not drift," she said. "That is intervention." Marcus glanced at her briefly, not surprised, just confirming. "Someone is rewriting your numbers in real time, but they're doing it carefully, slow enough to avoid detection, fast enough to change perception." Charlotte straightened slightly, her posture tightening as the implications settled in layers. "To manipulate investor confidence," she said. "To control valuation without triggering alarms." Marcus leaned back just enough to let her see the full scope of the feed, and to make it look like your system failed on its own when it collapses. Silence filled the room, not empty, but heavy with understanding, the kind that arrives all at once and leaves no room for denial. Charlotte's voice, when she spoke again, was quieter than before. "Can you stop it?" Marcus's eyes returned to the screen, calm, focused, already moving ahead of the question. "I can trace it," he said. A pause, one breath, then the twist. "Stopping it depends on whether you are ready to see who is behind it." Charlotte did not answer immediately, and for the first time that evening, the silence around her was not something she controlled, but something she stepped into carefully, as if one wrong word might shift the ground beneath everything she had built. "Show me," she said at last, her voice steady but lower now, stripped of performance and edged with intent. Marcus nodded once, his attention already returning to the terminal as his fingers moved again, precise, efficient, not rushed but never idle. 3 commands entered in quick succession. A pause as the system responded. Then a new window opened, layers of encrypted routing paths unfolding across the screen like a map that did not want to be read. "They are masking the origin," Charlotte observed, her eyes narrowing as she leaned slightly closer, her reflection faint against the glow of the monitor. "Multiple redirects, internal and external." Marcus adjusted the filters, isolating a repeating pattern that pulsed quietly beneath the surface traffic. "They are not hiding it completely," he said. "They're just counting on no one looking this closely." Charlotte folded her arms, her posture tightening as she followed the trail, her mind moving faster now, connecting departments, access levels, permissions. "This requires internal credentials," she said. "High level." Marcus did not look at her, but his voice carried the weight of agreement. "Yes." The server fans hummed steadily around them, a constant mechanical rhythm that seemed louder now in the absence of distraction, and for a moment, Charlotte could hear her own breath, measured but no longer entirely calm. "Narrow it down," she said. Marcus entered another sequence, the data stream condensing, focusing, until a single node began to stand out. Not obvious, not loud, but consistent, like a whisper that never stopped repeating. "There," he said quietly. Charlotte stepped closer, her eyes locking onto the identifier, the access signature tied to it, and something in her expression changed, not dramatic, not outward, but undeniable. "That access point belongs to executive oversight," she said. "It should be isolated from operational feeds." Marcus nodded. "It is supposed to be." 3 seconds passed. Then Charlotte spoke again, faster now. "Pull the user credentials." Marcus hesitated, just briefly, not from uncertainty, but from consideration. "Once I do that," he said, "you cannot unsee it." Charlotte's jaw tightened slightly. "Do it." He entered the command. The system processed. The identifier expanded into a name, a clearance level, a digital signature that confirmed what the pattern had already suggested. Charlotte's eyes flicked across the screen once, then again, as if verifying through repetition what she already understood in the first glance. "That is not possible," she said, but this time the words lacked the certainty they carried before. Marcus leaned back just enough to give her space, his voice calm, almost gentle. "It is happening." Charlotte's gaze remained fixed on the screen, her thoughts moving rapidly, recalculating every assumption she had made about trust, about structure, about the people she had placed at the highest levels of her company. "If this continues," she said slowly, "the projections will collapse within the hour." Marcus nodded. "And it will look like your system failed under pressure." She turned toward him sharply. "Which means the investors upstairs will walk. And the market will follow," Marcus added. Silence settled again, heavier now, not just with understanding, but with consequence. Charlotte took a slow breath, straightening slightly, the executive in her reasserting itself, not through denial, but through decision. "Then we stop it," she said. Marcus met her gaze for the first time since the reveal, steady, unwavering. "We can," he replied. 2 short words. 1 quiet truth. Then the twist. "But stopping it will expose them in real time." Charlotte Vance did not step back, did not look away, but something in her posture shifted from resistance to calculation, the kind that did not deny risk, but measured it with precision. "If we expose them," she said slowly, "we do it in front of everyone upstairs." Marcus did not answer immediately. He adjusted a parameter, isolating the data stream further, his eyes scanning patterns that continued to move like quiet currents beneath the surface. "Yes," he said at last. "In real time." The words settled between them with weight, not dramatic, not loud, but final in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. Charlotte turned slightly, pacing once across the narrow space between the server racks, her heels muted against the raised floor, her mind already running through consequences, alliances, fallout. "That room is filled with investors, board members, press representatives," she said. "If this turns into a public failure, it already is," Marcus interrupted gently. "They just have not seen it yet." She stopped mid-step, her gaze sharpening as she turned back toward him. "And if we do nothing?" Marcus met her eyes, steady, calm, not pushing, just stating. "Then they will see exactly what your competitor wants them to see." The server lights blinked in quiet rhythm, green and amber reflections flickering across Charlotte's face as realization settled deeper, not as panic, but as clarity she could not ignore. 3 seconds passed in silence. 2 breaths. 1 decision forming. "How long until the projections collapse?" she asked. 30 minutes, Marcus replied. "Maybe less." Charlotte exhaled slowly, her shoulders rising and falling once, controlled, deliberate, as if resetting something internal. "And how long do you need to reroute the feed and expose the source?" Marcus glanced back at the terminal. 5 minutes to isolate. 2 to redirect. Charlotte's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flicking once more to the names still visible on the screen, the access credentials that did not belong where they were. 7 minutes, she repeated softly. Marcus nodded. "If you give me control." She almost smiled at that, not from humor, but from the irony of it. A woman who controlled everything being asked to hand over control to a man she had dismissed less than 10 minutes ago. "You already have it," she said. Marcus paused, just briefly, then returned his focus to the terminal, his fingers moving again, faster now, each keystroke deliberate, each command building towards something that could not be undone. Charlotte watched him for a moment, not as a superior observing an employee, but as someone recognizing a skill she had not anticipated, a precision that did not come from routine, but from experience. "You have done this before," she said quietly. Marcus did not look up. "Something like it." She stepped closer, her voice lower, more direct. "You do not speak like a janitor." 3 short words. A pause. Then his answer. "I clean what others leave behind." Charlotte studied him for a second longer, her instincts shifting again, not toward suspicion, but toward something more complex, something that felt uncomfortably like trust. The terminal screen changed, the data streams tightening, aligning, the hidden manipulation becoming clearer, more visible, like a pattern finally stepping into light. Marcus leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but firm. "Once I redirect this feed, the numbers upstairs will correct instantly." Charlotte nodded once. "And the person behind it will be exposed to everyone watching," Marcus said. Silence followed, not uncertain, but resolute. Charlotte turned toward the door, already reaching for her phone. "I will delay them as long as I can," she said. "You have 7 minutes." Marcus did not respond, his attention locked on the final sequence, the moment where everything would either hold or fall apart. The servers hummed, the data pulsed, and somewhere above them, a room full of power waited without knowing that the truth was already on its way. Charlotte Vance stepped back into the corridor with her phone already in hand, her voice low and controlled as she issued instructions that sounded calm on the surface but carried urgency beneath every word. "Extend the investor briefing," she said. "Tell them we are refining the final projections." A pause as she listened. "I do not care how. By me 7 minutes." She ended the call before any objection could form, her reflection briefly catching in the glass panel beside the server room door, a version of herself she barely recognized, not because she had lost control, but because she had chosen to share it. Inside, Marcus Hale did not look up. The terminal glow illuminated his face in steady pulses as lines of data shifted, recalibrated, and narrowed under his direction, each movement precise, each command layered on the last like a structure built in silence. 3 sequences executed in rapid order. 2 system checks confirmed integrity. 1 deeper access point opened, revealing the underlying architecture most executives never saw. Marcus adjusted his stance slightly, leaning in just enough to read the response times, his breathing, even his focus, absolute. "Come on," he murmured, not in frustration, but in quiet expectation. The system responded with a slight delay, fractions of a second stretching longer than they should, and Marcus's eyes flicked across the screen, recalculating, adapting. He entered another command, rerouting a secondary path, bypassing a filter designed to obscure the origin further. The data stream shifted again, clearer now, sharper, the manipulation no longer hidden behind layers of noise. In the corridor, Charlotte paced once, then stopped, her mind replaying the name she had seen on that screen, the credentials tied to it, the trust she had placed in that position. 3 thoughts collided. 2 possibilities collapsed. 1 truth remained. She turned back toward the server room door and stepped inside again, quieter this time, her presence no longer disruptive but aligned with the urgency of the moment. "Status," she said. Marcus did not look away from the screen. 2 minutes to isolate fully," he replied. "Then I reroute." Charlotte moved closer, her heels silent now, her attention fixed on the terminal as she watched the data align into something unmistakable. "You're not just tracing," she said. "You are rebuilding the pathway." Marcus nodded once. "If I only trace it, they can deny it," he said. "If I rebuild it, everyone will see exactly how it works." Charlotte's gaze hardened slightly, not in anger, but in recognition of strategy. "You are forcing transparency," she said. "I am removing their cover," Marcus answered. The server fans continued their steady hum, but the room felt different now, tighter, more focused, like the moment before a storm breaks without warning. Marcus's fingers moved faster, the final sequences lining up, each command triggering the next in a controlled chain. 3 inputs, 2 confirmations, 1 final authorization required. He paused, just briefly, his hand hovering over the keyboard. Charlotte noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Marcus glanced at her for the first time in several minutes, his expression unchanged, but his voice carried a quiet weight. "Once I execute this," he said, "there is no reversal." Charlotte held his gaze, her decision already made before he finished the sentence. "Do it," she said. Marcus returned his focus to the screen and pressed the final key. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the data surged, the manipulated projections snapping back into alignment, the false inputs stripped away, the real numbers rising into place with sharp clarity. Upstairs, screens that had shown uncertainty began to stabilize. And at the same time, a new feed opened, one that traced the manipulation directly back to its source, visible, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Marcus leaned back slightly, exhaling once, not in relief, but in completion. Charlotte stared at the screen, her eyes fixed on the unfolding exposure, the truth no longer hidden. Behind complexity, the room fell quiet, and somewhere above them, the silence began. Upstairs, the shift did not arrive with noise, it arrived with absence, the kind of silence that falls when certainty disappears all at once. The massive projection screen at the front of the ballroom flickered once, twice, and then stabilized, the erratic fluctuations smoothing into clean, precise lines that told a very different story than the one investors had been watching moments before. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Eyes narrowed, not in confusion now, but in recognition that something had just corrected itself without explanation. "What just happened?" one board member asked quietly, his voice carrying farther than he intended in the sudden stillness. Another leaned forward, scanning the updated projections. "Those numbers, they're stronger," she said, almost to herself. "More accurate." A third voice followed, sharper. "No, they're different. They are real." The word settled heavily, and as if on cue, a secondary display came to life beside the main projection, unannounced, uninvited, but impossible to ignore. A live feed, a trace, a path of data rewriting itself in reverse, revealing each manipulation step by step, not chaotic, not rushed, but deliberate, methodical, undeniable. "Is this part of the presentation?" someone asked, uncertainty creeping into a voice that had been confident minutes before. No one answered. At the center of the room, Charlotte Vance stepped forward, her posture composed, her expression controlled, but her eyes sharper than they had been all night. She did not rush to the stage. She did not raise her voice. She simply moved with purpose, and that alone was enough to draw attention back to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her tone even, steady, carrying across the room without force. 3 words. A pause. Then she continued. "What you are seeing is a correction." A low murmur rippled, then faded as the trace continued to unfold, each layer exposing the manipulation that had been hidden beneath the surface. Charlotte glanced once at the screen, then back at the room. "Our system did not fail," she said. "It was altered." 2 executives exchanged uneasy looks. One shifted in his seat. Another leaned back, suddenly very still. Charlotte let the silence build, not filling it, not easing it, allowing the weight of the truth to settle where it needed to. "We chose transparency," she added, her voice calm but firm. "Because trust does not come from perfection. It comes from honesty." Across the room, a senior board member stood slowly, his expression tightening as he watched the trace reach its final node, the origin point now highlighted clearly for everyone to see. "That access credential," he said, his voice lower now, stripped of authority. "That belongs to—" He stopped. The room did not need him to finish. They could all read it. They could all see it. The silence deepened, no longer uncertain, but absolute, the kind that leaves no room for denial or deflection. Charlotte did not look at the individual behind the exposure. She did not need to. The truth had already done what confrontation could not. In the back of the room, someone set down a glass with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. Near the stage, an investor straightened, his expression shifting from doubt to something else, something closer to respect. "You fixed it," he said quietly. Charlotte shook her head once. "It was never broken," she replied. And beneath the floor, in the quiet hum of servers and steady lights, Marcus Hale stood alone for a moment longer, watching the final data stabilize, his work complete, his presence unnoticed, exactly as he intended. And above him, in a room built on power and perception, the loudest voices had nothing left to say. The room did not erupt. It did not fracture into chaos. It simply held its breath, as if every person inside understood that what had just happened could not be undone and did not need to be explained. Charlotte Vance remained at the center, her posture composed, her hands relaxed at her sides, but her eyes carried a clarity that had not been there before, not sharper, not colder, but more grounded, as if something beneath the surface had shifted into place. "We will proceed," she said, her voice calm, measured, and entirely in control again, but different now, no longer built on assumption, but on truth that had already proven itself. A few heads nodded slowly. Others remained still, processing. The board member who had begun to speak earlier lowered himself back into his chair without finishing his sentence, the weight of exposure settling into silence rather than defense. Charlotte turned slightly, acknowledging the screen once more, then stepping away from it, not lingering on the revelation, not using it as spectacle, but allowing it to exist as fact. "Our projections reflect real performance," she continued. "And real performance is what we stand behind." 3 sentences. A pause. Then the room responded, not with applause, but with something quieter, something deeper, a shift in posture, in attention, in respect that did not need to be voiced. In the back, an investor leaned toward his colleague. "She did not panic," he whispered. "She revealed it." The colleague nodded once. "That is leadership." Across the room, eyes moved differently now, not scanning for weakness, but observing strength that had not been visible before. And somewhere in that silence, Charlotte understood something she had not allowed herself to see for years, that control was not about preventing failure. It was about facing truth without flinching. She turned away from the stage then, her steps unhurried, her mind already moving forward, not backward, not toward blame, but toward resolution. In the corridor outside, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, the echo of the ballroom fading behind her as she moved with purpose back toward the server room. The door opened with a soft click, and inside, Marcus Hale was already stepping away from the terminal, his hands resting loosely at his sides, as if he had simply finished another task. Nothing more, nothing less. Charlotte stopped a few feet from him, studying him now not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as someone who had just altered the course of her company without asking for recognition. "It is done," she said. Marcus nodded once. "Yes." A brief silence followed, not awkward, not uncertain, but filled with something unspoken, something that did not need immediate words. Charlotte tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "You knew exactly what to do," she said. Marcus did not respond right away. He glanced once at the terminal, then back at her. "I have seen systems like this before," he said. Charlotte took a small step closer, her voice lowering. "No," she said. "You have done more than seen them." 3 words. A pause. Then the truth pressing forward. "Who are you, Marcus?" The server lights flickered softly behind him, casting brief shadows across his face. And for the first time, there was a slight shift in his expression. Not fear, not hesitation, but something like consideration, as if he was deciding how much of the past belonged in the present. "Someone who used to build things like this," he said finally. Charlotte's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. "For who?" Marcus held her gaze calm, steady, unguarded. "For people who believe control mattered more than truth." The words settled between them, quiet, heavy, and unmistakable. Charlotte exhaled slowly, her posture easing by a fraction. "And now?" she asked. Marcus glanced toward the door, where faint sounds of movement echoed from the hallway beyond, then back to her. "Now I clean what they leave behind." Silence returned, softer this time, not empty, but reflective, and in that moment, Charlotte understood that what he had done was not just technical. It was principled, rooted in something deeper than skill. She looked at him for another second, then gave a small nod, not of authority, but of respect. And for the first time that night, the distance between them was no longer defined by position, but by something quieter, something earned. The server room settled into a quieter rhythm as the data stream stabilized, the blinking lights returning to their steady cadence. And for a moment, nothing demanded urgency anymore. Nothing pushed forward except the quiet weight of what had already been done. Charlotte Vance did not move right away, her gaze still resting on Marcus Hale, not searching for answers now, but acknowledging something she had not expected to find that night. "You should come upstairs," she said finally, her voice calm, not commanding but offering. Marcus shook his head once, almost imperceptibly. "They do not need me up there," he replied. Charlotte held his gaze. "They do not know what you did." Marcus glanced toward the terminal, then back at her, his expression unchanged. "That does not change what was done." 3 words settled in her mind. A pause followed, then understanding. Charlotte nodded slowly, not arguing, not insisting, because for the first time, she recognized that recognition was not what drove him. "At least let me thank you properly," she said. Marcus allowed a faint breath of something that might have been a smile, though it did not fully form. "You already did," he answered. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. "When?" Marcus met her eyes, steady, quiet. "When you chose the truth." The word stayed with her, not loud, not dramatic, but deeper than anything said in the ballroom above. For a second, neither of them spoke. The hum of the servers filled the space between them, steady, grounding, like a reminder that some things did not need applause to matter. Charlotte stepped back then, her posture straightening once more, but not in the same way as before, not as armor, but as clarity. "This company," she said, choosing her words carefully, "needs people who understand what you understand." Marcus did not respond immediately. He looked down briefly, as if considering something beyond the moment, something outside the walls of the building, then back at her. "It has you," he said. Charlotte almost objected, almost deflected, but stopped because this time she understood the difference between confidence and deflection. "It does," she said quietly. Another pause. Then she added, "Because of you." Marcus did not answer that. He simply nodded once, a small acknowledgement, and stepped past her toward the door, his movements